And now let's go on to our summit speakers. The introductions for the speakers will be fairly brief as their full bios are located in your packets. Our first speaker, Dr. Margaret Wilmoth, was the inaugural dean of the Burdine F. Lewis School of Nursing and Health Professions at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia. With over 30 years' experience in higher education, she has taught across all levels of nursing education. She is an experienced leader in interprofessional training and education in both the civilian and military communities. As a member of the American Academy of Nursing, she co-chairs the expert panel on military veteran health, which has created and championed the Academy's Have You Ever Served in the Military campaign. She is currently the Deputy Surgeon General for Mobilization, Readiness, and Army Reserve Affairs in the Office of the Surgeon General, U.S.Army. She is the recipient of multiple awards, including the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, and the Expert Field Medical Badge. Please welcome Dr. Wilmoth.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm obviously also in the Army, and right now I'm on active duty working for Lieutenant General Patricia Horoho, the Army Surgeon General, where I am leading the transition team between General Horoho and whoever her successor will be. And I'm also in charge of recreating a new talent management strategy for Army medicine. So that's just two of my tasks while I'm on active duty. But it's really, truly an honor for me to be here with you all today. And I'm so sorry I wasn't able to be here yesterday to hear your speakers. It sounds like it's been an absolutely fabulous conference and very, very moving. And Mrs. Carter, I want to thank you very much for your vision in the space of family caregiving, and also thank you for Operation Family Caregivers. As you all know, fewer than 1% of all Americans serve in our military. So our family members and our service members that serve, and then family members that either send their loved one off to war and hopefully they come home healthy, but or if they don't, they spend, many of them, a lifetime taking care of their loved one. And they are really a very small and very precious part of our population. So thank you all for all of that you do for those who serve in the military. I also just got a notice across my BlackBerry. We still carry those in the military. And for those of you that don't know, November is Warrior Care Month in the military. And it is a time that we honor our wounded, ill, and injured military members and their families and their caregivers. So this is a really timely time to have this conference just before we have November as our Wounded Warrior Month. So again, I just want to kind of talk a little bit about that, and the timing of this conference is very prescient. And do I have the clicker? I'm an old professor, so I'm used to managing my own slides, and that's why I've got a mic, because I'm used to walking around. For those of you that have not been associated with the military, though, these are some of our wounded warriors. And as you can tell, many of them are quite active. Colonel Gadsden went on to continue to serve after his wounds in Vietnam, or in Iraq and Afghanistan, losing both limbs. Specialist Morocco was a double arm transplant patient. So many of our veterans go on to lead continue to serve in the military. They're not always retired after their service. And others do retire, but they go on and they lead very, very productive lives. One of the things that we found, though, with this particular war is that military caregiving have some very unique and their own special challenges, because they often have multiple injuries and very complex injuries that take a long time to heal. We also have a very complex system of care within the federal government, between DOD and the VA. And for the family members that have had to traverse that complex system of care, it's not easy. And it's not always easy to figure out where to go when to get help. We have tried to make improvements in that over the last 15 years. We've also officially recognized TBI and PTSD as being major wounds of war. And although I think we've always had PTSD, we've called it something different throughout our history. But we've really, truly made some forward movement in treating that this time. And the other part of wounded military is the cost of our care. I mean, this care lasts a lifetime. And it really taxpayers have a responsibility because we are helping to provide and support the care that our military has. So it's very complex care. RAND has done a lot of studies looking at the impact of military wounds and treatment of our wounded and injured after the most recent wars. And these individuals are going to last a lifetime of care. And those of you that are caregivers out there know well what I'm talking about. It is not something that you just do for 8 hours and then go home. It really does transform the lives of those around them as well. And I have been a parent that sent a son off to war twice, so I know a little bit of what it's like to actually send a loved one off to war. Now, the only caregiving I did was taking care of his dog, who happened to break my kneecap in the process of me taking care of the dog. So I was the wounded person after providing care while a loved one went off to war. But I was very grateful and I'm very fortunate that my son came back healthy, as did his wife. You know, in every war, we have learned something new. The evacuation system that we now have in the civilian sector came after the Civil War. That is when lettermen learned that we should use some of our wagons to then evacuate individuals off the battlefield. It was after the Korean War that we learned the value of shock trauma and the golden hour, and then the platinum 15 minutes. That came from war. Many of our medical advances have come from war. A couple of the advances that have come from this past set of conflicts has to do with both warrior care and then how we recognize and treat traumatic brain injury. We're making great strides in trying to prevent that with new kinds of helmet construction. We're partnering with the NFL on trying to prevent concussion care. So it's not just a military problem, but problems that are recognized in the military then often spread throughout the communities. And then traumatic brain injury and then PTSD. We're really making some great strides in trying to both minimize the impact of PTSD as well as to improve the treatments of PTSD. And one of the most notable things that we've done after this particular conflict is how we work with our warriors when they come home. We started the warrior transition units in about 2007, 2009. And that really has transformed how we manage and care for our military when they do come home injured. We didn't used to provide this kind of care after World War II. We didn't have the kind of robust care models that we have now in the military. And this is one of the leaps ahead, I think, that we've taken in military health care. And then trying to improve the linkages and the handoffs, if you will, between DOD and the VA. You know, we have veterans who are eligible for VA care who are still serving. That never happened before. So we have created an integrated disability evaluation system that has tried to minimize the length of time of looking at veterans and what kind of disabilities they have, and then trying to smooth the handoff, the transitions between the DOD and VA. And so that is really, truly one of the advances that we've made. And the other area that we advanced is in terms of adaptive sports. You know, anybody here an exercise science major worked in the adaptive physical therapy space? That has really, truly been another advance that has come from this tragic wars that we've had the last 15 years. And I'm going to let the IT tech show you what we have done in the space of adaptive sports.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
If you've ever seen a Hollywood movie where the actor gets blown up, that's exactly the way I felt.
You feel that in your kneecap?
The blast itself killed 2 of my best friends. I'm gonna make them proud. Speed it up, speed it up.
You shook hands with the Grim Reaper and walked away from him.
How's everything going today, Sergeant Garcia? Squad leader, yeah, I keep in touch with every single day.
He's working with OT with that.
The triad of care that I have with my case manager, my squad leader, my primary care manager, they know who I am, they know what my injuries are.
Our focus is to make sure that they receive the care they need.
How are you doing with your PTSD?
I'm doing better.
Okay.
Not doing the best.
You ended up breaking a sweat.
While I was at the WTB, my transition plan was pretty aggressive to get me back to duty. And sure enough, 14 days later, after having a mastectomy, I was on a bicycle.
Dennis McCormack called AW2.
As a spouse, having an AW2 rep, that makes a huge difference.
You may have just gone through the hardest thing in your life, but it's still one of those little things, just a little curveball that life throws at you.
This is your time to really be honest with yourself. My little brother always said, but you got hurt, why do you stay in? I tell him, I like doing this is what I do, you know. It becomes a part of me.
It's not just a medical place, it's somewhere where they're planning out their future. They've got to know where they're going to be going from here.
We put them on the board today to kind of provide a roadmap.
The comprehensive plan gave us a framework to where we could say, okay, in a year, this is where we'd like our lives to be.
So I decided, you know what, I can't do armor anymore, so maybe I'll try to go do PA school. I think we're going to come out of it in a better position in life.
How a amputee stretches. Side stretch, back stretch, calf stretch, and this is how you become a runner.
Life is not about what you don't have. It's about what you do have.
On your marks.
A lot of times we talk to each other because I've gone through what they're going through.
My 75% is better than most guys, 100%, and that's the way I live my life.
I have endless possibilities.
Every year we have the Warrior Games, and I'm proud to say Army won it this year. There's a big competition between Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. It was held at Quantico this last summer, and Army took home the trophy. So, you know, the competition really does help our wounded warriors get better, and they have a support group within working and striving to become part of the Warrior Games. A few years ago, I was visiting Walter Reed, and I was with a group of general officers, and we were in the PT area, and then we moved over to the occupational health area where they were teaching individuals how do you live and adapt into a kitchen. And I wasn't focused on the soldier. I was watching this father that was with his son. And the son had lost both legs, one arm, and had a not very good functioning left arm left. And I kept trying to talk to the dad in a PT area, and he, you know, all these general officers, he wasn't too sure about us. And my nursing instincts took over, and I finally got him off to himself in the OT area. And his comment has stuck with me ever since, and this kind of highlights how our caregivers have changed. In that he said, I thought I was done toileting my son when he was 2 years old, and he's now 21. You know, so that really drove home to me the impact of caregiving and the life-changing impact that many of these families were going through because of what their child or their husband or brother, nephew, cousin had gone through. And so our caregivers that we have really changed in the last 15 years. And there really are many more parents, and I don't think we often in the military think about parents. I know when my son was deployed, the first time I didn't hear from him for 5 or 6 months. And, you know, I was doing the, you know, 1 foot in front of your, you know, every day. And finally I called where he was stationed, the rear detachment, and he had been cross-leveled to somebody else, and they really kind of blew me off when I talked to the rear deck commander. And I was a mom when I called the first time. And I called the second time, and I used rank, and I was a colonel at the time. And I got a response then. So then I called the post IG, and I said I should not have to use the military rank. The rank of mom should have gotten me what I needed. And my son, you know, I think sometimes in the military, for early in the war, we forgot that there were families beyond spouses that were on bases. And for our reservists, they're not on a base. You know, we live out in communities. We are your neighbors. We go to school with your children. And we are very much a dispersed force in the Army Reserve and the National Guard. And I think oftentimes that piece is sometimes forgotten by some individuals. And that's why Operation Family Caregiver is so critical, because you all are out in the communities. You're away from the military bases. You're really out there helping, reaching out to us, those of us that are around and dispersed around the country. And as you can see, our caregivers have often changed over time, although I would say there's an awful lot of parents that are still trying to caregive their wounded son or daughter in the last 15 years. Access to care is another huge issue, particularly for reservists. And I've talked to several of you last night and today about the rural dispersion and how hard it is to reach servicemen, women, and their family members when they're in a very geographically rural area. One of the things I will say that we in Army Medicine have done well, we have a new behavioral health service line, and we have expanded telehealth capabilities within Army Medicine. And I think that is really going to help when we're talking about geographically dispersed servicemen and women because of our telehealth capabilities. And I think that that is really going to be something that we should be able to leverage over time. Because again, you know, our goal is to have no more than a 30-minute drive. Whoops. But you can't always do that in a rural area. I used to live in a rural area. I used to have a farm. So I know that you know, distance can be a real factor and a real hindrance, particularly as you get older, you know, and the ability to drive and go places. So that Military One Source is another opportunity. Anybody here heard of Military One Source? It's an online access. Anyone, a military family member or service member can access it, but there are 12 behavioral health counselings that one can get through Military One Source. So that is another resource, and it's at no cost. So Military One Source is a great access for opportunity for people to take care of. The other thing that we in the Army Reserve have is something called Fort Family. It provides 24/7 access for individuals in a crisis. Army Reserve Fort Family, your rally point resource guide. General Talley, the current chief of the Army Reserve, has started this. It's 24/7, 365, telephonic. There are a couple physical centers, one in Brevard, North Carolina, in the mountains. Anybody from North Carolina? But it also provides help with temporary housing, emergency funds, disaster relief, debt management, emergency home repair, assistance with locating nearest installation, separation or coping issue problems. The other thing that the Army Reserve has is a very robust child youth services and school services program. And we just had the head of that speak at the American Academy of Nursing last weekend about the Army Reserve, because I think we sometimes forget about our kids and the fact that reserve children and guard children might be the only child in that school that needs some help. And so the other thing the American Academy of Nursing is starting is an iServe 2 program, and trying to educate guidance counselors and other pediatrics and school nurses about children that might be serving, because we are not, reservists cannot get access and get care on military installations. There's rules and regulations about who is priority of care on active duty posts. So again, the Army Reserve Fort Family is a real important resource for reserve component families. And I know each of the state guards has similar programs. Army Reservists are Title 10. So what we have access to differs greatly from what the National Guard has, because when they are state status, it's Title 32, and they have access to state funds. Our reservists do not. Army Reservists, Air Force Reserve, Navy Reserve, we are Title 10 federal force. So therefore, what National Guardsmen can access in their state is not the same as what reservists can access. So there are colors of money, if you will, that flavor what we can access, and the kind of orders that someone is on when they are wounded or injured impacts reservists and guardsmen care that they're able to receive and how long and what type of care they're able to receive. So if you're working in OFC space, you're working with military, it's really helpful if you understand the difference between IDT training, meaning our drill weekends, where there is unless you're actually injured in duty, your access to care is very limited. 12301B orders versus 12304H orders. Each of those different kinds of orders provide you with different abilities and access to care. So if you're working in that space, it's really important that you understand that. And I'll be sure Lisa has my email address, but there is a matrix that we've developed out of the Office of the Surgeon General's Reserve Affairs Department that talks about all these different flavors of orders and what individuals are able to access in terms of care. Because again, it differs greatly, and it's, in fact, I'll show you the algorithm that it'll make your head swim. It's an algorithm that says, if this, then this. So again, it can be a maze in learning how to figure out who's entitled to what when. So again, if you're working in the space and you're working with Army Reserve or National Guard, understanding Title 10, Title 32, and the different types of orders makes a difference in how you're able to help them access care, either particularly within DOD, but then also they have to have gone through a board and been determined to be physically disabled to get VA care, or have come off active duty, been mobilized, and within 5 years they can get care within the VA. But we're federal agencies, and therefore we have policies and regulations that vary different from what's in the civilian sector. So it's really important that you kind of understand those nuances, because it's not that we don't want to help care, it's that sometimes we're not able to because of policy and regulation and statute. So it makes giving care a little bit more complex. And again, Mrs. Carter and Dr. Esom and Candy Farrar also alluded to this about the importance of taking care of yourself and ensuring that the stress of caregiving or being a caregiver, as well as the wounded warrior, does not lead you to depression. It's really important that you seek care for yourself, you have some self-awareness, that we help our servicemen and women if we think they're having some depression, if they've just broken up in a relationship, help them seek care. Oftentimes what we've found in the Army Reserve anyway, that frequently the individual who commits suicide has never been to war. They have not deployed. Some of our young servicemen and women who have committed suicide just joined and haven't even been to basic training. And then something happens and they commit suicide. So suicide is not directly linked to war. We have many servicemen and women who've never deployed and have committed suicide. So it's a societal problem, but we in the military wrap our arms. They are our comrades, they're our buddies. We try to help each other, but it truly is a societal problem. But helping people to understand that getting help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. That knowing that you need someone to talk to, it can be very empowering, and helping people understand that. We've done a lot of work in the military trying to reduce stigma. I've already talked about our telebehavioral health capabilities, where we're trying to make it easier. Many of the millennials would much prefer to be on the internet rather than a room face-to-face. Anybody here raise sons? How do you talk to your boys? You don't look them straight in the eye. You do parallel play. So my boys would always talk to me when we were driving places. And we had really good conversations when we were driving, when they didn't have to look me in the eye and I was driving, and they would do a dump. And so I think it's important to understand that what works for some people doesn't work for others in getting them to talk and to seek help. So we have a variety of tools and techniques. We're working on some apps inside the military that our soldiers can download. We have a new app called for the performance Triad, because that ties into the next piece about taking care of ourselves. We all know that you can't be a healthy caregiver if you're not taking care of yourself. You can't be a good warrior if you're not taking care of yourself. So we're talking about performance triad inside Army medicine. We're teaching the Army that it's important to sleep 8 hours a night. What a concept for many of our warriors, sleep. Eating properly. You'd think we as the Army would eat properly, but we do have a lot of Burger Kings and Popeyes and other things on military bases, which we're trying to change. We're trying to at least influence them to have healthier choices. We're working with commissaries to try to have healthier food choices inside our commissaries. And then we're also talking about activity. And you would think that we in the Army would already understand what it takes to be physically fit and active. But not always. And it's also important for our family members to understand that they need to also sleep properly, eat properly, and exercise properly, because that helps with resilience. That helps you deal with the stresses of life if you have those basic three. And then with our caregivers, and I was talking to one individual last night, and she said she had forgotten who she was. She had lost her identity in her range of caregiving. And I think that's really important, that we need to help our caregivers understand that they are important in and of themselves for who they are beyond being a caregiver. They often have social isolation. They also, the emotional distress that comes with that, and the physical deterioration that comes from caregiving. It is very stressful. So again, for those of you that are caregivers or working with caregivers, the Performance Triad might be a good app. Talking about having Fitbits, somebody was talking about that last night too. Everybody, who else here has a Fitbit besides? You know, they do kind of keep you honest about, you know, at least getting enough steps in a day. I know it's 3/4 of a mile from my apartment to the Pentagon, and then I walk another couple miles around the Pentagon when I'm there. But again, taking care of yourself and getting enough steps is really important. And we in the Army, and Army medicine and the Army Surgeon General, is really serious about making sure that we are healthy and that our family members are healthy. Again, I think Mrs. Carter said something very prescient many, many years ago. She said that there are 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver. And that's probably all of us in this room at some point in time. So again, those of you that are caregivers or working with our warriors, working with our families, I want to thank you very much for what you do on a daily basis. I know it's often unsung work, but it's very important work. And again, our soldiers, in fact, I was talking to one of our commanding generals in one of our regions a couple days ago, and he said, you know, my soldiers wouldn't be able to go to war if they didn't know that there wasn't high-quality health care to take care of them and their families when they deployed. And I also believe that part of what we in Army medicine and what you all are all about is also making sure that when they come home, and if they do need caregiving, that we have highly prepared, compassionate caregivers there to take care of them. So again, thank you very much for what you do on a daily basis. Have a great conference.
We're a little off track, but that's okay. We always build in extra time just in case. So let's go ahead and take a break. We're going to start back at exactly 10:30. If you're not in here, you're going to miss a very powerful speaker. So I urge you to be in here and ready to roll at 10:30. Thank you.